we're going to start this morning's plenary. This is the, in the spirit of Monique, 1 second warning. Great. It is wonderful to see you all this morning. I hope people got a little bit more sleep than we all did the night before, maybe a little bit. And welcome to, as I often refer to it, another Aspen perfect day. It's phenomenal. I say that only semi-jokingly. It's always pretty gorgeous here. And I was talking with someone right before the session started who was saying last year there was a brief moment when we got to learn a bit of history about the Aspen Institute. I'm not going to go into that this morning because we want to stay on time with our plenary, but I will just say this, that being here is not an accident. It isn't happening just because it's a beautiful place and we've got a facility here. When you think back well over 60 years ago when Walter Pepke, who is an American businessman, first came to Aspen, he saw what we all saw. That is a spectacular place. And I think we all know from our work that environment matters. And he envisioned this as a place where policymakers and leaders from all sectors and artists and musicians and those from the grassroots, people would come together, and it would be a place of ideas and thoughtful contemplation, and a place where people could spend some time a little bit disconnected from the rest of your life. It's a little bit harder to be disconnected these days than it was in 1945, but disconnected from the rest of your life so that people could come here and be thoughtful and then go back into the world and to share what they had learned here. And from his vision, when he first saw this gorgeous place, the Aspen Institute was founded about 4 years later. And it's been, I think, a real blessing in that way for us. And we see it that way. I think the spirit here, the energy that's here, and the ability to come and to share. And hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people have done that over the last 60 plus years. There is an opportunity, if you'd like to learn more, on the Aspen Institute website about the history of the Institute and what's happened here over that period of time and how it's grown and thrived and some of the other properties that are part of the Aspen Institute orbit. But we are certainly honored and thrilled that you've taken time out of your very, very busy lives and come from your communities to this beautiful place, a place of ideas, a place for leaders, a place to share and to learn, and then to take those ideas back out into the wider world. So this morning, I've got with me an amazing group of people, many of whom are old friends, some who are new friends, and from whom I know that you all will learn a lot, and an opportunity for us to talk about this movement and about movement building and what you all have created and how we can sustain that as we leave the Aspen Institute and we go back into the world and we do our work and focus on opportunity youth. And as I was thinking about this panel, I started thinking about, and you know, as my husband and I often say to each other, stay with me now, just hang with me. I was thinking about this. You know, I don't know if sometimes when you all go on vacation and you take those little roads, kind of those state roads, that are often really beautiful and winding, and you realize that at one point the country was full of those kinds of beautiful winding roads. We didn't have this massive interstate system that we have today. And as wonderful as they were, over time, leaders in the country recognized that as a matter of national security, as a matter of being able to move goods and people more quickly, that we needed something bigger. We needed to build on that foundation. And it was an important movement that actually started in the early 1900s and grew decade after decade after decade until the interstate highway system, the federal system, this national system was built that we often utilize today for all the reasons that they realized starting in the early 1900s. And in many ways, I analogize that to what we are doing today, that we have really fantastic work that's been going on locally for a long period of time, but we've recognized that there's a national imperative to build something on top of that, to use that as a foundation to meet the needs of opportunity youth all over the country. And we're lucky that we've got actors from diverse sectors who have contributed to that movement. to build on what's happening in your communities, to connect us all, as the federal highway system does. See, my analogy's kind of working. To connect us all and to do something that meets, I would argue, national security and moral imperative and economic and community needs in the way that this wonderful movement that we have today is doing. And so I think we're really fortunate that we've got this group of people sitting here with us today to talk to us a little bit about how that movement has come about, who is a part of that movement, this national movement, and as I said before, how can we sustain this as we leave this work in Aspen and as we move forward from the work we're doing in 2014 and look to 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road. So with that, and I'm not going to introduce everyone I'm not going to introduce everyone en masse right now. What I want to do is introduce them as I start to ask them questions. And don't worry, I will make sure that there's plenty of time for you all to engage us in conversation as well. So I want to start out with Dorothy Stoneman from Youth Build USA, who in many ways I think needs absolutely no introduction whatsoever. I think of Dorothy as a significant and long-term leader, I dare say almost kind of matriarch of this wonderful movement that we have today. And Dorothy, I'm hoping that you can start out by talking to us about what you've seen over time in the ways that this movement has gotten started. Because for a while, people were toiling in the vineyards and there were activities scattered all over the country. And now we see something that looks quite different.
Thank you. Melody is a wonderful friend, and I am very honored to be here, very happy to be here. I just arrived at 2:30 this morning, so I'm scanning the audience for all my friends, and I'm seeing a lot of you. But I think that we have the most amazing opportunity to unleash a positive force across the country because the Aspen Institute, because the Opportunity Youth Network has begun to converge across sectors. Opportunity Nation has done it, the Campaign for Youth has done it, CLASP has done it, many organizations have done it over the years. But I think we're at a special point now where things are coming together. And I tried to prepare, I'm supposed to give a history of the movement. No way it's possible in the 3 minutes. So what I realized is that the toiling in the vineyards and the work at the National has been back and forth for a long time. And we haven't succeeded to the extent we'd like to. But I want to tell an early in the vineyards story because I think that the place of the movement that we're at is one where we're going to be working on all fronts simultaneously and need to be connected with each other through the Opportunity Youth Network. Starting in 1978, when I was in East Harlem and the young people there said, we want to rebuild our community and we want to rebuild our lives and we need help, and we began to do it, and we did it at that time with grants from federal funds. And then in the early 80s, the federal funds died out, and I turned to our East Harlem Youth Congress and I said, I cannot do this anymore just writing grants. You have to go downtown with me to the city, talk to the mayor, talk to the city council, tell your vision of how your communities need to be different and what you want to do to rebuild them and to change them, and then we can get resources. And so we did that. We formed the Coalition for $10 million, and I think I'm telling this story because I think it relates to what all of these grantees are going to be doing. Took 150 young people, 50 organizations. They spoke. They stood at attention overnight while the city council was coming up with their budget. And sure enough, the city council put $5 million in the budget for what this group of young people in this coalition for $10 million had recommended. When we realized that when you ask the government for something, they never give you what you ask for. You're lucky if they give you half. We went back and crossed out 10 million on our T-shirts and wrote 20 million and came back the next year as the Coalition for 20 million with twice as many young people staying in the corridors talking to their elected officials, and they gave $12 million to Opportunity Youth. Right. And so then everybody in the city, because we built in everyone's agenda to this $12 million, and we did great things in New York as a result. Now, in 1988, Sam Halperin wrote The Forgotten Half, right? And I just named Sam Halperin because he passed away this past year. But the number of people who have devoted themselves through their own hearts awakening to the talent that is being submerged and suppressed through the injustices, the poverty, the unfairness, the extreme hardships that low-income young people are faced with. When we as adults open our hearts to that, we are freed to bring our best to it. And when we give our love, our respect, and open the doors of opportunity and skills and community and safety to the young people who feel like they have no hope, it unleashes an unbelievable force for good. That's our job, is to produce that and keep the power of love coupled with opportunity at the core of what we do, because that's where the force comes from. Let's also keep solidarity at the core of what we do, because part of the problem throughout the movement is when there's shrinking funding, everybody feels like their precious work could be squeezed out. Let's fight for each other all the way. I think that's my time.
And just one, yes, I agree with that. And I'm going to transition to Jamiel in a second, but what you talk about, I mean, the need has always been there, and you talk about the importance of unleashing that force. Why do you see that happening now in a way that it wasn't happening 20, 30, years ago? What is it about this particular moment?
Well, I don't know that it's happened yet enough. I think that we're saying we're going to do it. And I think we can do it because there's a coalescence. I think that President Obama's White House Council for Community Solutions was a turning point. I think that Melody taking over the Aspen initiative, and Steve Patrick coming, and Monique and this whole crew deciding, and wherever Thaddeus is over there, we're going to make this happen. We're going to pull in all the sectors. It's making a difference. I think enough people have recognized, and I think when John Bridgeland changed the language to opportunity youth instead of disconnected youth or at-risk youth or out-of-school youth, that helped, because it began us to message the fact that young people are seeking an opportunity, and they are an opportunity for the nation. And I think that Elyse and other people have brought to the attention of the world the fact that employers need this group of young people too, and that is an additional force. I think we need to know that we haven't begun to tap the goodness and the power and the love of the young people who are still locked in poverty. And so that's our job.
Absolutely. And that is a perfect segue, I think, to Jamiel, who is on the Council of Young Leaders with Youth Build, and also sits on our Leadership Council. And Jamiel, I would like you to talk about your experience in this movement and doing this work, and also to get a sense from you as to how those of us who are a little bit older can help create some of the pathways that you and your colleagues, your peers need to engage and to be powerful. Because we all talk about this movement with young people, and that cannot be lip service. We have to walk that walk, and we have to walk that walk together. So I'd like your perspective on your experience and how we can best do that.
Thank you, Ms. Mel. And thank you, Aspen Institute, for this opportunity, and Youth Build, AmeriCorps, for developing me. And I'm kind of dive into it because I've been thinking about it as far as the prep call. I was nervous, and I really appreciate Sister Monique. Like, Jamiel, when it's all said and done, just be real, be you. And I'm still, it's a process and a journey. So Mo, she was asking those clarifying, she was just, prepping me like, Jamiel, what's 3 things that they can take away? Don't make it so hard. And instead of, instead of those 3 things, I wanted to kind of do 2, but at the same time, do a couple layers to it. So play your part. It's something I do with the young leaders back home. Play your part. Know your role, whether you're an adult or a young leader. When it's all said and done, I'm going to use Ms. D, because when it's all said and done, we went through a process. When I first met Ms. D 10 years ago, Conference of Young Leaders, you know, I was starstruck because I was there as a participant, right? I was starstruck. Oh, this is the lady, da-da-da-da-da. But the thing about it is I didn't really know I was a participant because back home, I was the AmeriCorps supervisor, but I was still considered a young leader, right? So I finished the program, AmeriCorps signed up for a second year. That's a whole nother story. Let me stay focused. So I wind up being discharged from the Conference of Young Leaders. Why? Because I really didn't know my full role as a participant. I was 21 of age, but in that code of conduct that I signed, what happened was, you know, we wasn't supposed to drink or do anything outside of, which was good because it was leadership development. Mind you, I'm a teenager crossing over to the 20s, right? So long story short, so I want to kind of suggest here, when you know, play your part, know your role as coaching and mentoring, what you already know, be honest and transparent. One thing I love about Ms. D, sometimes she'll come to DC and just say, Jamiel, just sit with me, but she'll prep me of what's going on. And I might not even have anything to say, but on the flip side, she's telling me what's going on so I can process these meetings. Right? So we all know about the whole coaching and mentoring and different things like that. And then when I went back home after Conference of Young Leaders to my CEO, I got reprimanded. I got reprimanded, which was good because it was a good process for me because it humbled me, but it made me focus to my local. It made me focus locally, and we began to build a more alumni base on a local level. So with that being said, I wound up coming back, and this is where I get that term from, stay humble, stay focused. Because I felt that pain and reminded me when I was in juvenile and you get reprimanded, when you go to jail, you go somewhere, you don't want to feel that pain again. So that's what motivated me. I just kept going, just kept going, just kept going. All right, so coaching, mentoring, so you reprimanded me. And then, well, no, but it was a need though. When you think about coaching, it's more of a subordinate role. You know, you're a supervisor, which was good, and I respect that because he did do it in love, and he wound up being my mentor, and we know the difference between coaching and mentoring. So long story short, went back home, they asked me to serve on the National Alumni Council, brothers and sisters within the Youth Build movement, where we're trying to create here through Youth Build, through the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund. It was more of a brotherhood, and it is a brotherhood and sisterhood in a way where we develop each other. We're always fighting for funding. Miss Dorothy, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? You know what? Why don't we use each other? Let's use each other. You're good at this, I'm good at that. Bartering system, classic stuff, but it was a new way of doing it for millennials. So there was a national council. So that kind of gave me the opportunity to serve on the National Council of Young Leaders, being a sponsoring organization from Youth Build with 7 different organizations. So you had Public Allies, Year Up, shout out to the Core Network, Ms. Mary Ellen, been a fan since day one. So we all came together. Okay, now it's more than just Youth Build. This is a national, we're gonna make this thing work. So to kind of move forward, what's some things you can get away with? Play your part. And then I'm going to kind of close with this. And this is a new term we use back home called the 5. And I did this morning, so I got to be myself. Ms. D is sitting here, so I feel like she got my back, so it's cool. So I did this morning. It's the E5 approach, engage. We do it, but I'm really trying to make sure I anchor this with you all because it might be a new term for you. So engage. Help me out, Ms. D. Educate. Edify, experience, and equip. And with all that, with the power of love being centered, you become empowered. So it's a new term, so I use this so you can anchor it. And if you need me, I'm here, but I'm going to kind of close with this because it's all anchored in love, right? And she said this earlier, and Big Brother Steve's like, what's going on? Like, this is human development. And you've been saying it since day one, those private conversations before we get started. But the second thing we must do in this movement is love. So this kind of wraps it up in a way where love is patient and kind, never jealous or envious, never boastful or proud, never haughty or selfish or rude. Love does not demand its own way. It is not irritable or touchy. Does not hold grudges and will hardly even notice when others are doing it wrong. It is never glad about injustice, but rejoices whenever truth wins out. If you love someone, you will be loyal to him or her, no matter the cost. You will always believe in him or her. I will always believe in us. Always expect the best from each other. I'm kind of making it work. And always stand your ground in defending them. From the Living Bible Version. Peace and love.
Thank you. And Jamiel, I think you, for not only for yourself, but for your peers who are here and not here, also gave evidence to the fact that it is important that you all set the table with us, that we don't set the table and then say, y'all come on, but you set the table with us, and what you can teach us, and also the ways that you have laid out particular paths that we can choose to take to help build the movement with you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for that.
Much love.
And there is a lot of data and information in that. I think data and information come in lots of different forms, and you just shared an important set of pieces of information that we can take from this room. And I think, you know, Russell, moving to you and Opportunity Nation. Opportunity Nation is one of several organizations that thinks about work with opportunity youth on the ground that has evidence and data and research that's brought to the table to help support everything that Jamiel and Dorothy have been talking about, and how those two things can be intertwined. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the work that you all have done. I know you all most recently have put out an index with more data and information. If you can share that with us, and how you envision your role in the same way that there are other actors in the room who play a similar role in providing us with that kind of information.
Definitely. So happy to be here. So I think my part of the conversation, as Melody said, is really linking back this critical population, young adults broadly, but especially opportunity youth, to this big national debate about expanding opportunity, right? That's the sort of the issue of our time. The president talks about it all the time. Leading Republicans want to own that space as well, who are vying to possibly, you know, whether this gets you excited or exhausted, you know, we're about to enter another presidential campaign. We've got the elections Tuesday first, but then it'll be full steam ahead. That's the debate we're going to be having, which is good. It's the one we should be having. How do more people get on track to achieve economic security, especially those who live in places where often their zip code determines the opportunities that they have. And so Opportunity Nation, as a campaign focused broadly on expanding opportunity, has chosen to really lift up opportunity youth and the fate of young adults, and especially low-income young adults, as a particularly important piece of that puzzle. Blair Taylor spoke to this really powerfully yesterday, and many of the others have as well. You know, we will never achieve the economic gains that we want as a country. We'll never do the big things that we want to do, and we won't remain globally competitive with a big chunk of our young people on the sidelines, not plugged in to work and school. That matters not only for their own economic fate, as you all know so dearly because you work in communities, it also matters for our larger economy. And so what I want to really mostly share in my time here is this opportunity index tool that we've developed, because it helps demonstrate what you know in your lived experience, which is that when young adults do well, communities do well. When they're plugged in, they get training and education, they get that first job. Their personal life prospects certainly shoot up, right? Their lifetime earnings go up. Their chance at stable families goes up. Their ability to move through various career pathways and have more choices goes up. These are all great things for the individual young people that you are doing heroic work to reach. But we also know there are huge economic ripple effects from the fate of young adults, and our Opportunity Index helps demonstrate that. And so I just want to share it. It's a free available resource for you that hopefully can buttress the work that you're doing locally. It's a tool that we developed with the input of many partners that are working with us, some of whom are in the rooms, people that are a lot smarter than me, and with a research firm called Measure of America that's really good at taking complex data sets and making them accessible to people. So we measure 16 indicators. So this is a tool that goes beyond just measuring how young people are doing, but it includes a very important measure, which is the rate of youth disconnection in a certain state or county. So every state and every county gets a score based on a compilation of these 16 indicators. The idea is, let's get beyond a one indicator mindset, right? Just the unemployment rate, which gets huge play in the press. It's very important. We include that. It's very important. It's not the only thing that matters, right? So we measure the violent crime rate. Can people safely walk down the streets where they live to go to work, to access green space? We measure the per capita rate of access to doctors, which we know is hugely important. What's the high school graduation rate? What's the poverty rate? And we measure the rate of youth disconnection, of what is the percentage of opportunity youth out of the 16 to 24-year-old cohort in that state and that county. So everyone gets a score. States are ranked 1 to 51 because the District of Columbia is included, and counties are given grades like in school A to F. And so as Melody said, stay with me on this. This is a little wonky, but it's really important for your work. So we measure all this stuff, right? 16 indicators, they're all important. They're big, complex macro numbers that are very important. When you run a correlation to see which factors most impact a community's overall score, they all matter. The poverty rate and the rate of youth disconnection have the biggest and the highest, strongest correlation. That's a wonky statistical thing to say, but that's a really important finding for people that don't live and breathe this work. One of our big roles as a campaign that's not doing direct service work, but is trying to help support the movement through convening and through thought leadership and through converting stakeholders one by one, whether that's a member of Congress or another thought leader in a different sector, is take this data into those meetings. So I'd encourage you to do the same. It's there for you to use. Take it to your board. Take it to a funder you're trying to convince to fund you. Take it to a local elected official that you want to care more about this population, and tell them that this data shows us when young adults do well, communities do well. Places with higher numbers of disconnected youth, or opportunity youth, of course, as we positively frame them as assets, and that is still a term that's starting to catch on outside of these walls. Communities with more of those young adults who are opportunity youth tend to have lower scores than all these other indicators. They tend to have depressed scores across the other indicators. Communities that do a better job of getting their young people on track and investing in them early tend to have higher scores. So this is a huge ROI argument, and it's a huge argument to folks, again, that don't live and breathe this and that care about the bottom line. I want to wrap up by sharing just a couple of examples about how people are using the data. You might be thinking, great, data's awesome as like an academic exercise, but what can we really do with that? So we've really empowered a lot of partners locally, many like you all who are running these collective impact efforts. We've had some partners really use this data as a jumping off point to bring cross-sector players to the table. I know that's really, really hard work that you're doing every day in the trenches. This can be a way to help you do that, because if you care about jobs, or if you care about education, or if you care about sort of community health, those elements are all kind of measured within the index. And so it's a way to get people around a common table as a starting point to a conversation to say, okay, what can we now do where we live to improve these indicators? We would always encourage you, of course, to marry this data with your local lived experience. We would never come in and suggest that we know better about where you live. So this is a starting point. And I know many of you in your communities have your own indicator projects and your own data points that you should absolutely pair with the data in the Opportunity Index as a way to get that conversation going. We've seen folks do that in Iowa. They've brought together a cross-sector group. They want to stop a brain drain of talented young people moving out of the state. They want to reduce youth disconnection and get more young adults on track and reduce the number of opportunity youth. And they want to make sure that their big employers have skilled workers, which I know we're going to hear more about on the employer piece from Danielle and Elyse. That's a lot to tackle, and the index has helped them get their arms around that. They brought together advanced manufacturers, John Deere, their big community college in Des Moines, and thought about how can we build some pathways that would really put more young adults on track, which I know is the very work many of you are doing, which is hard to get those stakeholders wrangled. This can be a way to help incentivize that. We've also seen foundations use it. The Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, for one, in Florida, big diverse state, right, with lots of different things going on, has used the county level opportunity index data to make some decisions about funding, because they don't want to keep pouring money into places that are already doing well. They want to target dollars to communities that have some challenges, but that they can see bubbling up. There's some possibilities. Maybe high school grad rates are bumping up, but are still well below state averages. So another great thing about the tool is you can compare the data in your county to the state averages and to the national averages to see how you're doing. You can also do side-by-side county comparisons and state comparisons. So I'd commend it to you all. The new data just rolled out last week, and building that out on an interactive site is a massive task. So the website is now fully functional with new data. The mobile site is still getting updated. If you're welcome to pull it up on your smartphone. Depending on your interface, this is a little wonky, but it may still be pulling a past year's data on your phone as we're getting that updated. So just keep that in mind. Next time you're back at your computer, pull the site up, opportunityindex.org, and hopefully it can be useful in your work. But the bottom line for me that I'll close with is, I would completely agree with Dorothy. We are in a great moment. We have enormous momentum. The wind is at our backs in many ways because of the sweat equity of the people in this room and many people who are not here. But we have a lot more to do. I know many of you probably talk to reporters in your role at your organization at some point. I do a little bit of that. And I can tell you, whether we're promoting the story of a young person lifting up a partner like Year Up or Youth Build or Gateway to College and promoting it as a pathway, and educating media about this issue, there are still massive layers of misperception and negative stereotypes about young adults in general, but especially about the young adults that we really care about. So one by one, we're trying to turn around those stereotypes. This Opportunity Index can help us do that to show, first of all, what are people really facing in communities that are really struggling? These are some steep, steep hills to climb. And secondly, how are they our assets to our broader competitiveness and economic health, which is so critical. And so it's an exciting moment. I think I'll share more in the back and forth about lessons learned. Even reporters on this beat often, it's sort of shocking, the lack of education about this population. So we've got a lot more in front of us. And part of that is the public will building that I know Elyse will speak to with this exciting Grads of Life effort as well. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so we've talked about blending data and research and information with the lived experience that we all have in our communities. We've talked about the importance of leadership, and in particular youth leadership at the table. One of the things that I've heard, and I've been hopping from panel to panel over the course of the last day or so, and also on the stage, people have talked about the role of employers and how important it is to have employers at the table with us as we do this work. And I want to now turn to Danielle from the Clinton Global Initiative to talk about the work that they've been doing and the things that we are able to take away from their work as we try to translate that to our work in local communities.
So first, thank you, Melody, and to Steve and to Monique for having me here. But a big thank you to all the grantee cities for allowing me to spy on your team planning sessions and ask you a ton of crazy questions, because what I learned from you is really guiding the work that I'm doing with employers, but also the work we're doing at the national level and also with each individual commitment maker. So very little bit about CGI. CGI is a membership services organization. So the folks we work with day in and day out tend to be very large corporations, philanthropic organizations, and very big NGOs. We also do a lot of work with government. Our focus is not on policy or legislation. Our focus is on commitments to action. That is the CGI currency. You are only allowed to join CGI if you promise to commit to doing something. So back in 2011, we took a look at our commitment portfolio, saw that the majority of those commitments were being made abroad, but the majority of our members were domestic entities. And so we thought, we need to create a platform where folks are comfortable making commitments that focus on economic growth, the long-term competitiveness of the United States, and social mobility. And so the president launched CGI America back in 2011, and workforce development, skills development has always been an extremely important focus of that work, and I lead that portfolio. Back in 2011, it was a large working group that focused on all types of workforce development and all types of populations. Not surprisingly, the youth population was the most popular population in 2011. And so going forward, starting in 2012, we created a separate working group from that initial workforce development working group to focus specifically on the opportunity youth population, and we've dubbed it Reconnecting Youth. And so we have workforce development, we have Reconnecting Youth. In some ways, they're very much the same and they play off of each other, but we thought it was important to have a working group that's specifically focused on the opportunity youth population. From the inception, we have focused on demand-driven commitments. We have focused on the importance of employers. And so that working group has convened over the past 3 years. But we were very lucky. In 2013, Secretary Clinton joined the foundation, and she made youth employment one of her major issue areas that she was going to focus on for her work at the foundation. And so working with her team, especially Moderator, my colleague at the foundation on the Secretary Clinton side, we spent months after CGI America 2013 working with folks like Elyse, Gail Gershon from The Gap, and several other employers, community-based organizations, operators, funders, government officials, economists, to really learn, okay, what's working, what's not working, where are the gaps? And so back in the beginning of 2014, we put together what we called a menu of options for employers. It was literally a two-pager. It focused on 3 bucket areas. It said to employers, will you make commitments? And after months of talking to about 20 employers, we had a very large group of folks who said, yeah, we want to make commitments in this area. So what does that two-pager look like? We basically said to employers, pick something that you'll do internally at your organization to train, mentor, or hire opportunity youth. Do something externally that you will do to encourage other employers to get involved with this population. Then we had a third sort of bucket an optional area where we said, how can you be a part of the movement building? And what came of that at CGI America in 2014 is that 10 employers announced their commitments to action to train, mentor, and hire opportunity youth, including 2 non-for-profits, Small Business Majority, who's in this room, and Leaders Up, who I know we spoke about yesterday, who are working on employer-led interventions within their industries. And so from that work, we've seen within our membership not only a great appeal to make commitments, but to work through many of the challenges that some of them face as employers, trying to engage their leadership, trying to engage folks internally at their organizations in supporting this work, trying to figure out how to engage the local communities and their markets that they care about. And so we've launched back in September the CGI US Youth Employment Action Network, where literally we are working with employers each month to brainstorm and troubleshoot and work through opportunities and challenges. And so really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about, they set the agenda, so I want to let you know what are the topics that are important to them when thinking about working with opportunity youth. So our meeting in November next month is going to focus on making that business case to your CEO or your CFO for why investing in this population is important and why it's important to your business. Our January meeting is going to focus on making the case internally to other departments. So maybe CSR is putting up a lot of money supporting CBOs on the ground. Or you have a business unit like IT that's doing a lot of hiring. Well, how do you make that connection, but also how do you spread the love internally and get more departments and teams to jump on board? What if you don't have a ton of entry-level positions that would allow you to hire this population, but you're mentoring them, you're training them, you're even providing them internships? Well, our third meeting is going to focus on how do you engage your suppliers, and I know we talked a little bit about that yesterday, but how do you really engage your suppliers with becoming involved in this population? Our fourth meeting is going to focus on how do we change internships and apprenticeships to really look at them as learning opportunities for young people, where they gain real learning and education experience as well as job experience. And then our fifth meeting is going to take a look at those commitments that have now been alive for 6 months to 9 months, and pulling out those best practices with our commitment makers and having them focus on those best practices. So to date, we've had 13 employers make commitments to non-for-profits as well and a trade union. So we have 16 commitments.
Great. Thank you. I want to continue with the employer theme and bring in now Elyse Rosenblum from the Employer Pathway Project. And you all have been doing such important work that aligns with our goal of bringing more employers to the table. And as we've been talking about consistently here, there is a perception shift, a mind shift that has to take place for that work to really take root. And I want you, after we show something, I want you to talk about a couple of the tools that you all have been providing to help move that part of the work forward. But first, I want to call everyone's attention to the screens to see a video that Elyse will tell us more about in a second.
Please Please have a seat. I'll be honest. Your resume is not what I'm used to.
I know.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need a hard worker.
Good. I've got 2 part-time jobs and I help my parents pay the bills.
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find, cultivate, and train a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
This is a new PSA that just launched about a month ago called gradsoflife.org, and it's a project that's been in the works actually pretty much since the end of the White House Council on Community Solutions, where those of us that have been thinking for many years now about how to get employers thinking more about this population of young adults as a source of talent recognize that in order to really help drive this movement, we needed a much broader communications campaign. Really focused on doing 2 things. One is to change perceptions about opportunity youth and really frame them up as a source of talent for employers. And then secondly, to drive changes in business practice. And I think what's great about the PSA is it does both really quickly and really concisely in a way that kind of speaks to both the head and the heart. And we know from research that that's what it's going to take to bring employers to the table. We've got to have data, we've got to build the business case, and we've got to really help them see these young adults in some different ways. So the campaign is a tool and a resource, I think, for the field. It was created by a coalition of organizations, Year Up, the Employment Pathways Project, the New Options Project, Opportunity Nation, and Mentor. You'll notice there's no branding on the campaign. That was very intentional because we see it as a tool for the field and for everyone who's working to create bridges between employers and young people. So I encourage you to use it as you're trying to bring employers to the table to really help make the case for why they should be looking to develop a new source of skilled and diverse talent and positioning the young adults that you're working with in that way. To complement the PSA campaign, we've built an online digital platform that's at gradsoflife.org. And it, for the first time, really collects all of the case studies, the research about what's working for employers. We've built a set of how-to guides with some partners at Manpower that really breaks down the steps employers need to take to do things like mentoring, internships and apprenticeships, training and hiring to make it very easy for employers, because we know that's a key, is both to kind of meet them where they are, solve some of their pain points, and then make it easy for them to expand their talent strategies. The platform also spotlights best practices. It has all of the Job One commitments as well as commitments that employers are making through My Brother's Keeper and other ways that employers are making commitments. And then importantly, it has a partner directory to help employers find folks in their local community that they can work with to get started in creating pathways for young adults. So it's a great resource. We're going to talk more in a breakout session this afternoon about how you can use it, but I would encourage you to take a look at it. I think there's a lot that you can learn about how to work with employers, and then a lot that you can use as compelling evidence to bring employers in your communities to the table. The other thing I just want to reflect on is, and this is sort of piggybacking on what Steve was saying yesterday, it's a really incredible moment in this work in general, and I think particularly on the employer demand side. I mean, I have been at this for a long time, and you were talking about toiling in the vineyard. I call it, speaking into the wilderness. I mean, I would say for the first 5 years, when you talked about employers and employer demand vis-a-vis this population, people just sort of looked at you blankly, like, what? what are you talking about? We need to fix the education system. And we do. But there is now a real shift. And people, I think it started with the White House counsel's work. I think having CGI and Secretary Clinton step into the space has been huge. Now we're seeing the U.S. Chamber of Commerce getting into the work. We've got small business majority. We've got incredible leaders like JP Morgan Chase and Starbucks stepping forward. So there is incredible momentum. And I think the key, I remember thinking when the council ended, how are we going to keep this? This is amazing. How are we going to keep the momentum going? And I think collectively we've done a tremendous job building that momentum. And now I think we're at another moment, and the question is how to keep it going, but more importantly, how do we align and leverage all this work so that we really have the kind of impact that we all want to have.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to open the floor up to you all now, and so that you will have the opportunity to engage with the members of our panel. You know the drill. We've got mic runners around, so raise your hand, give us your name, where you're from, and we will start to take questions. I see a hand up already, right there, the gentleman with the reddish tie.
Yes, hi, good to see everyone. Andy Moore, National League of Cities. I'm stimulated by the discussion on the panel, and I want to return to your original analogy, Melody, about the interstate highway
You work for
system.
somebody? Thank you.
I've been thinking about apt analogies since at least the summer for this moment, for our movement. And I agree that we should look more at the interstate highway system, the support of a president who used to be a general, bringing along the Pentagon, contractors, unions, et cetera. All of those were part of the puzzle in the 1950s and 1960s that resulted in huge national investments. And that followed on 150 years of national debate about the role of the federal government vis-a-vis roads. So we need to pay attention to that and thinking about that analogy. This summer, I said we need to look also at a current effort that has a lot of momentum, even more than we do, and that is early childhood ed. And what I suggested, and I'm interested in further dialogue about this, is that they've got non-traditional advocates beginning with the Federal Reserve. They've got statistics and persuasive return on investment data that we lack or that we haven't mobilized to our best use yet. They have foundation investments orders of magnitude above ours and program areas within foundations solely devoted to early childhood ed. And they've got huge steam gathering at the city level, at the state level, and at the federal investment level. So I'm wondering, fed a little bit by envy of our colleagues working on early childhood ed, if there are things we can learn from them about how to get our movement going even better.
Great. Anyone, Elyse?
I'll just start by saying I think you're right. Looking at the early childhood movement is really smart. We just finished up some work with Bridgespan trying to think about how to really look at the field and think about accelerating the movement. And one of the things we did is look at a bunch of other movements like fair trade, like early childhood education. And I think you named a lot of the things that they have put in place to help bolster that work. And I think we are very early days in this movement. One of the things we took away from our work with Bridgespan is this is an emergent field. And so I think that we already are looking to other movements to figure out how do we build unlikely champions. We happily just had the chair of the Federal Reserve for the first time talking about essentially this issue. And then in Boston, we had the Federal Reserve chair kind of dovetail on that and talk about the importance of employers stepping forward to address social mobility in a variety of ways. I think many folks are thinking about how to build out the business case and ROI and cultivate employer champions. I think we have some new foundations stepping into the work, and there's important work to be done to make sure the foundations that have been early investors stick with it over the long haul. So it's early. I think the truth is it is early days, and this is emergent, and that's both daunting and challenging, and I think really, really exciting. So,
I think there's a piece of our message that relates to the early childhood education issue that we haven't mobilized, and that is that we're reaching and engaging the young people who are parents or who are going to be parents of the next generation to be raised in poverty before their children get to be 4 and 5. And what I'm seeing throughout the Youth Build Network is that our young fathers and mothers are doing a great job with their children, and their children are thriving, and that they're at the top of their class.
Come on.
Right? You should see Jamiel's children.
Come on. Stops here.
But
The cycle of poverty stops here. Like.
That's right. The cycle of poverty stops here. So we're looking for some researchers who would take a look at that intergenerational effect, because if you get the 16 to 24-year-olds, if they change the trajectory of your lives, then you've made a huge difference to the next generation.
And there is actually another project at Aspen that's focused entirely on that, the Ascend project, which is looking at 2-generation strategies. And I think they are increasingly thinking about employment pathways as part of their work. And you should definitely connect with Ascend.
Ann Mosley, who runs that program, is a great friend and collaborator with us as well. You're exactly right. I would also add, I think the perception change work that we're doing here is critically important in a way beyond what's important when we talk about early childhood. Because let's just be blunt, people, even with all that's happening in early childhood, and it's a field that I've worked on as well, it still hasn't gotten over the finish line. We are seeing wins in that area. But at the same time, people gravitate more quickly and more easily to how do we help 0 to 3 than they do 16 to 24. So the work that we're doing there is very, very important if we're going to succeed as this movement starts to build steam.
Ms. Mel, can I say something?
Yeah, please do.
Everyone learns from intervention and treatment work, Preventive work is easy, I believe. And then, us being on the ground in the neighborhoods, that's more so treating. Like, we go into the neighborhood, these young brothers dealing with death every day don't even know how to process it, So nobody, that's the hard work, and this is what I love about this. We've been saying it all week. We are the choir, but yeah, let's keep doing it,
Keep singing. Thank you. Great. Is that Thaddeus?
Hello. Yep. Hello, everyone. Thaddeus Ferber at the Forum for Youth Investment. Dorothy mentioned the Opportunity Youth Network, so I wanted to give you a little bit more information about it, because I'm going to stay with me. I'm going to have an invitation for all of you at the end. But a couple of years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, the Aspen Forum and Opportunity Nation and Youth Build and a couple other leading organizations saw how much was happening in the Opportunity Youth space. And so we really wanted to make sure our efforts were connected and aligned. So we created the Opportunity Youth Network that's bringing together federal government officials, foundations, corporations, nonprofits, and young people themselves to take stock on what's happening, lift up areas where more than one organization is working on the same thing, that we could help bring them together to help align their efforts, and then also identify key gaps where something needs to happen and it's not, and work to try and get people to move together towards that. So the activities are, we have these monthly online meetings and an annual in-person convening. And over the last 2.5 years, a number of localities and people who work at not the national level have said, well, those sound great. I want to be up to date. I want to know what's going on. I want to participate as well. And we've been saying, no, we're just going to focus on nationals till we really figure out what this network is and how it works and where the capacity is. And we just had our annual meeting October 1st, and we worked on these questions together, and we decided, okay, we're now ready to open the door to organizations who want to participate in these online meetings and the annual in-person convening. So I will send an email to all of you at some point inviting you to opt in. If you want to get the meeting invites for these monthly meetings, you can join the ones you want, not join the ones you don't. And just to give you a flavor of what these are about. So the November meeting is going to focus on digging into the Opportunity Index Russell's been presenting about. It's also going to dig in deep on the new version of the Workforce Investment Act, which requires localities to spend $300 million more across the country on out-of-school youth as opposed to the in-school provisions. And then in October, we're going to focus on the role of youth development organizations like YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs. I don't see them a lot in these type of convenings, but when I meet with them one-on-one, I find they're actually doing a lot of work with disconnected youth. So we're going to give that a chance to lift up. And then in in January, we're going to focus on the two-generation approach that folks mentioned and really lift up the work that people are doing to treat the parents and the children in a cohesive and collective way. So stay tuned, look out for the email. If you want to be on the invite list to the online meetings, you can opt in, and if you don't, that's totally fine as well.
Great. Thanks, Sad. Thanks, and look out for that email from him. Oh, George.
I want to add to what Thaddeus is saying. What the Opportunity Youth Network has done collectively is set a goal, which I think is the right goal for all of us, and that is to reconnect 1 million young people to education, employment, national service, and leadership. And that, we're still discussing, it's going to be 1 million fewer people who are out of school and out of work in 5 years. It's also going to be 1 million opportunities a year, up from the 450,000 that now exist. But we're going after that, and Opportunity Youth Network, and we need everybody. Opportunity Youth Network has embraced the Opportunity Youth United, the National Council of Young Leaders that Jamiel mentioned, which is 11 organizations so far who have joined.
Programs on the table. Information is on the table, 6 principles and everything.
So we're going to try and enroll as members of Opportunity Youth United young people across the country so that they can be a voice in this presidential campaign with the recommendations that their leadership and that they have put forward and uplift that visibility.
Great. Thank you. Other questions?
I'm coming.
Hi, thanks. I can't resist. Steve Patrick. Can't resist adding to
What
the...
organization are you from?
Hopefully still with the Aspen Forum now.
We'll talk.
Okay, thank you. I shouldn't have done that hiking meeting before the convening. Just kidding. All right, so I just wanted to add to the Opportunity Youth Network conversation and acknowledge Thaddeus's leadership, because a lot of folks kind of thought about it, pulled it together. Monique was one of the really thought leaders who said we have to, it was all still about seizing the moment coming out of the White House Council. And it really, at that annual convening that Thaddeus referenced, just a few weeks ago, one of the observations is that we are at the least turfy moment that I can remember in the youth movement. And it's a technical term, but it's really kind of part of what's so profound and powerful about what Dorothy and Elyse and everyone up on this great panel was talking about. One thing I will just say about this, and this is a plea to the funders in the room, the Opportunity Youth Network has been doing all of this organizing and coalescing of all these national networks, many of the national organizations that are here and who are listed in your book, whose logos you can see, really mobilizing around this big goal, this big, hairy, audacious goal that Dorothy talked about. And they've been doing it with like no resources, just nothing. So those of you who are independently wealthy, and I know there are a ton of you in the room.
We are in Aspen.
We are in Aspen. But really, then this is a plea for support really for the Forum for Youth Investment, because originally Aspen was holding the fiscal sponsorship of it. And we are core partners, and we're going to help drive it along with everybody else here, but I think we need just a little more resource so that we can staff that national network. And so, sorry for the gratuitous plea, but I'm going to put it right out there. And,
Great. Thank you. Is there a question? Yes, right here.
That was fast. Hi, I'm Adria Steinberg from Jobs for the Future. To everybody there. First of all, I want to thank you for bringing together in one panel the power of organizing, the power of youth leadership, the power of data, and the power of the demand side, because those things together are incredible. But I was wanting to go back a little bit to the first half of the panel, the organizing and the youth leadership, because it makes me think of another analogy, which is the civil rights movement. And the power that both youth leadership and organizing had there, and I think it's worth thinking about lessons from there as well. And would love to hear some comments on that. And then the last thing is I do think there's an asset that we have that the early childhood movement doesn't have, which is people like Jamiel who can speak for themselves. And the movement, I know that little kids are cute and there's a lot of photo ops around early childhood, but we have these powerful young leaders.
So I guess the story, thank you, Miss A. We love you, Jobs for the Future. Thank you. And so long story short, and I guess I'm gonna kind of refer back to Big Brother Steve in a way where it doesn't make sense to me, and this is a personal fight as far as my brothers and sisters, as far as young leaders. There's no funding when it comes to leadership development. There's no funding. You want us to be these young leaders, you want us to be these assets, and we're realizing who we are and becoming empowered, but at the same time, how do we develop ourselves? That's why the NAC was created, so we can develop each other and stop getting mad at Ms. D and Youth Build USA because the money's not there. You know, so as we move forward and create together with the Aspen Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund, like I'm blessed to be a part of this, you know, watching it grow and develop at the same time. But when it was all said and done, the money is key. Money matters. I love you all to death, and I'm learning that. You know, you think about it. You think about businesses. I remember the one class we was going over the Edwards tool manufacturing. You know, they was actually saying how they had 120 days each manager had to do as far as orientation, and how they had to invest this time and this money in this particular employee. Why aren't we thinking about that when it comes to these young people? The brother said it yesterday on JP. What was that? JP yesterday with Brother Chance. All them billions of dollars. And you don't want to develop and help us grow, but you know what? Big Brother Mill, we're going to make this thing work. All right. Is all right?
I want to add a principle around the leadership development, and I don't know if it's the civil rights movement, but I internalized it early when I was a staff in 1965 at the East Harlem Block Schools, which was a parent-controlled school in East Harlem, controlled entirely by low-income parents who lived in tenement buildings because living in the projects was considered too rich. And they hired me, and they were my employer, and I worked for them for many years. The same thing is true of the young people. Our job is to listen to and be accountable to people in low-income communities who have the understanding and the vision. They have the understanding of what's wrong. They know how it needs to be changed. They have the vision of how it could be, but nobody has ever respected their intelligence, and they've internalized a sense of powerlessness and a sense that no one ever will listen to them, and they don't necessarily even trust their own intelligence. So respect for the intelligence of low-income people, including opportunity youth, is core to anything we do, and having processes where professionals' role is to ask, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then amassing that information into sets of recommendations for change. That's how the National Council of Young Leaders moved from just being a nominated group of young people to being a group holding briefings on Capitol Hill, because they developed their own set of recommendations. We need to move from young people being asked just to tell their stories to young people being engaged in finding and creating and communicating the solutions. Both roles are important because the stories are powerful and real, and a lot of people don't understand those stories if they don't hear them from somebody. But being a change agent whose intelligence is respected, and what I find, I mean, what we don't understand is that among the young people who dropped out of high school and who've been kicked to the curb and have been in prison, the continuum of intelligence, of talent, is just exactly the same as it is in a private high school. It's an enormous intelligence being wasted out there, and when you bring it in, you just go, wow.
Right. I just want to briefly add a comment to building on that and to the good question from Adria and the comment from Andy too. I think this framework of building multiple pathways as a messaging tool is really powerful. I know, Steve, and that's been mentioned a lot at this convening. We found that to be really effective, especially cultivating unusual allies. We do a lot of work in Capitol Hill, which is Congress is a really fun place to work right now. To put a spin on it, I'm being sarcastic. It's a huge mess, but you know, we've actually found that while we would not paper over the huge disagreements about how much government should be involved, where they're very real. the idea that more of our young adults should be on track is something nobody disagrees with. And so finding the frames that bring people in, particularly conservatives who maybe you don't think of as natural allies, it can be done. And so I think this notion that everybody's got to finish high school and get a BA and then get a job, we're finally pushing past that because of the work of this field. And that notion of building lots of strong pathways is finally breaking through. I think it's really powerful. I think people get that. And we found some real champions in both parties that want to embrace that and say, what can we do? Part of it's the government funding programs that work. Part of it's the demand-side employers. It's everybody having their hands in this. Lots of on and off ramps, lots of routes. And let's stop stigmatizing people that don't go on that one path we were all socialized as the right one. We do ourselves a big disservice, our young adults and our whole economy a big disservice. So I would encourage you to keep using that frame. I think it's really helping and can push through and have some success as much as the early ed folks have.
And it's a great frame, but it's also, as a substantive matter, it's the right way to go.
Absolutely.
And it respects
it's the only way to get to the solution.
That young people are experts in their own lives. So, we have to listen, and we have to ask questions, and we have to act in concert with young people that we're working with. Other questions? Great.
Hi. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Andrew Lewis with the Hopi Foundation. And this is more of a challenge to the folks on the panel and to the people in the room. I really liked your metaphor, Melody.
Thank
okay.
you.
And I'd like to also remind folks that the interstate highway system was developed primarily, or in part, to move resources and communication, facilitate communication between large urban areas. And then in the process, it bypassed tons and tons of rural areas. And not only did it bypass them, but in some cases, gutted them. Lots of places withered because they were no longer connected to those channels of communication. And so just now, by the way, I looked up on the Opportunity Index, our county, and it's a great tool I just discovered because in about 30 seconds, I could get the score for our county, Navajo County. It's a D. And I would hazard that the score for the community that I'm in part representing is probably an F. And we're 70 miles from the nearest interstate, right? It's very, very hard to become part of these conversations. And so the challenge is, how can we make sure that the 1,000-fold rural communities that are not being served and that have OY crises, how do we serve them? And I would suggest that the reason we have an OY crisis in our cities is in part because we haven't dealt with it in our rural communities. Right. So thank you.
Anyone on the panel, I think that certainly speaks to the kinds of systems change that we're looking for and ways that we can start to get to the scale and the numbers, but also being really critical and thinking about the diversity of communities that have to be at the table, again, helping to set the table as we move forward. Are there members?
Yeah, so this is a commitment that actually was made via the Workforce Development Working Group this past June, and obviously it's only going to be a very small dent on your question, but I think it's important to share. Country Music Television, CMT, actually realized that they have a huge reach to communities that are often left out of the conversation, especially rural communities. And so they've been working with the American Association of Community Colleges, a Rural Association of Community Colleges, and several individual rural community colleges to put together a whole entire marketing campaign, but also to leverage CMT, country music artists, to go out to rural communities and actually get folks aware of opportunities for training and development at the post-secondary level. So they're using CMT radio, they're using CMT TV, they're sending their artists out to community college campuses. And obviously it's going to not solve the entire problem, but I think we need to think about those non-traditional ways of using communication and technology to impact communities that we're currently leaving out of the process.
I think it also points to the fact that we cannot give up on forcing the federal government to invest more in rural communities, in all communities. But for example, 25% of the Department of Labor's Youth Build grants are made to rural communities. The Rural Assembly said, please expand this. But they didn't expand it because the federal funding is shrinking. So there are many different types of programs, and I think the Service and Conservation Corps are working in many rural communities. If we could expand that funding, the delivery system does exist to reach rural communities. They're just being cut back.
Right. And I also, just to connect 2 points that were just made, because you're right, Congress is a mess right now. And I spent, God, I don't know, 11, 12 years working in Congress. But if we cannot, I hate doing this, the double negative. Let me say it this way, we have to pay attention to that. We can't just walk away because it's a mess and think, oh, it's calcified, nothing's happening, because things are happening. Right. And if we aren't there to make sure that our voices are being heard and to make sure that we are prepared for the moment when change does happen and that our perspectives, our needs are at the table, then the bypassing of our communities, the bypassing of young people will continue to happen. So it is a both and, it is a walk and chew gum, definitely. It is a build a plane as you fly it, it is all those things at the same time kind of a moment.
And to piggyback on that, government is not just Congress, so we do a lot of work with the Appalachia Regional Commission that really does care and pour a lot of money and resources into the rural communities in Appalachia, right? We also do a lot of work with the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. And on the ed side, most of it is on the partnership side. So it's what can we do with the funds that we have and how do we incentivize those outside to do great work, right? So I think obviously Congress is important, but we have 2 years left of an administration that has poured a lot of resources and time and money into innovative partnerships, and we need to think about that as well.
Yeah, and the regulatory and executive actions that can be taken. Right. Is there a question in the back? Sorry.
Yes.
Great, Mamadou.
Yes, thank you. So, Mamadou and Jai, I'm with Jobs for the Future. I'd like to thank you all for the work that you do. And I'd like to hear the panel's perspective on what I'd like to call the problem of more, which is scale. We are passionate as a field, right? We love what we do. We love our students. At the same time, today, the majority of opportunity youth do not have access to pathways that lead to credentials and careers, right? And if you talk to a funder, whether they're from the sort of the private philanthropy or whether they're from the government, if they utter 3 words, the third one is going to be scale.
Right.
So I'm curious about, is there a message, is there a strategy around the problem of scale that frankly we face as a field that we also need to respond to our funders and to society in general? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mamadou. Yeah, Elyse?
I mean, I'm happy to start with that. So I think I'll say from those of us that have been working on the employer demand side for a while, that grew out of exactly this question. That, we're never going to have enough probably never going to have enough public dollars and certainly not going to have enough private philanthropy dollars to scale programs and models that are working. And it is, wonderful to see the Obama administration really, targeting resources and investing in trying to grow stuff that is working. But I think a huge scale strategy is getting employers to really understand what is their role and why should they be putting skin in the game in growing new sources of talent and doing it in partnership with educators and nonprofits that are building pathways for this group of young adults. So I think at least one major part of the answer to scale is activating the private sector to do this work in their own self-interest. And that is what I think it's going to take to really see the flywheels spinning in huge numbers to see scale of models that are working. And new models that we haven't even developed yet, that they will develop because it'll meet their needs.
This goes back to funding. It's so hard to fund advocacy. And I agree with what Elyse said, but I also think that we shouldn't give up on getting the $6.4 billion that it would take to get to 1 million opportunities in the existing federal programs that could expand. And I think we need to go after the state. I mean, it is in the state's best interests to really liberate opportunity youth from poverty because they will stop committing crimes and the costs of prisons will go radically down. It's in the interest of mayors to cut violence and to increase engagement in their communities. So between mayors and governors and the federal government, it is in our nation's interest at every level to invest in this group. And part of what we have to do is prove that it works. And we have trouble, there's no money for communications. We're finding across the field of the DOL-funded Youth Build programs. Now these are 93% young people who left high school without a diploma. They're all poor. They're 65% men. And 61% of the enrollees now, after they go through this holistic program that has education, employment, counseling, caring, leadership, 61% are landing safely in college or jobs. Now, if we could get 61% of the out-of-school young people who are all poor on track, we would have a radically different community and society. And we can do that with not that much investment. I mean, that's what's amazing. That's why it's so heartbreaking that you've got a program that works and you have a delivery system that works, and the only obstacle is people saying, oh, well, forget about any more money because the federal government isn't going to spend it. And we have to not accept that, and we have to make sure that people vote.
I've got Mike there, and then there's another question further up front. Please.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you guys for the passion.
Can you give us your name and where you're from?
My name is Jansen Azarias. I'm with an organization in Tucson, Arizona. And I want to thank you guys for the passion that you guys are pouring into. It's refreshing to see you guys and just to hear the passion behind it. In our youth work, what I've noticed is that a lot of the opportunity youth experience a lot of trauma at an early age, and they experience a lot of emotional distress and a lot of mental and behavioral health issues that there seems to be very little effort in being addressed in the education system or any youth work in general. I'm curious to hear with the Opportunity Youth Movement, what is being done to really answer some of those mental and behavioral health issues that a lot of these kids are growing up in. I mean, the trauma, the amount of trauma they see. What is being done to address those?
My Lord. I can speak. Give me your first name again. Jansen. I met you yesterday. We was outside talking. So I'm going to kind of answer that if you don't mind as much as I can. So long story short, I have to speak to my experience when it comes to Youth Build. Leadership development is self, community, self, family, community, and I always put God, of course, right? So when I started really being engaged, I started realizing some of those hurts. We started basically sharing circles, really talking about our experiences, and I found myself opening up because it was more than a movement. It was more than that. We was brothers and sisters. We had a shared experience, but at the same time, like, how can we make this thing different for others, right? So that was a great point, but we haven't really figured out how do we do it intentionally when we're moving together and scaling, right? So I want to kind of encourage us in a way where creating those opportunities, but at the same time, how do we focus on that data that's talking about that mental, you know? But on the flip, how can we use it to empower, you know, because the sob story is over. The sob story is over, you know, and I want to kind of say, go back to leadership development. So as I began to develop myself, my family, I was the product of a divorce. Father on drugs, mom fighting cancer, lupus, so I was confused. So eventually when I started, and that's what I love about Aspen and even Youth Build, I get to share different experiences in my life, so it's becoming therapeutic to me, so I appreciate you. But then on the flip side, where are these opportunities created for these other young people so they can share? So let's think about that moving forward when you talk about the youth and adult partnership.
Right. It's part of why I talk about love, because if the young people experience loving, caring, welcoming, safety, and a peer group that has that, and then you structure these circles of caring and you teach the adults it's your job to show how much you care, the young people do begin to unload some of that trauma and grow out of it. If you keep them just as people who are being referred here or referred there, they're going to get this skill or that skill, or it's all outsourced or something like that. Have to create a holistic community for the young people who have had trauma.
And let me tell you what happened, right? My relationship with my mother and father, both sets of parents, are so wonderful right now because when I'm sharing, they're so proud of me, right? And it's to open up a conversation in a way where, like, Jamiel, I never saw that. Like, I never seen that. Like, I appreciate, you know, and it's almost like, so when I go home, shout out to mom and dad, both sides of the family. I want to sit down like, okay, let's continue to have this conversation so I can be a better father to mine. Because the cycle of poverty, like I said earlier, stops here.
Yeah, this is such a significant issue. And I am looking at a colleague, I'm not going to call any names, that I met last night at dinner, also from Tucson, who I know has deep expertise. I know there are others out there who also are working on these issues. I mean, I think should be a place for this conversation to continue. Think about using the board in the back in ways that we can connect each other, and also thinking about how we can continue this as we meet and convene and do our work, because this is really, really important. How many other questions do we? Okay, this is what we're going to do. I think there are 3 hands up. Why don't we take those 3 questions in a row, and then we'll have the panel respond, and then we will have to close out. So.
Good morning, I'm Ken Thompson. I work at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Since Mamadou opened the door, I'll just say scale, scale, scale 3 times, and then we can move on. Although my question is kind of a bit about scale, and one of my reflections, of course, thank you, is that in fact we have a system in the United States that operates at a huge scale, and its very purpose for existence is to train people for careers. It's the post-secondary system. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. The numbers of people in it dwarf the number of opportunity youth. And I'm just wondering, and it's not that employers and community-based organizations, we need to sort of support lots of different groups to do better in this work, but to what extent, since we already have a really giant system operating at scale, which by the way is an advantage over the early learning system, they've struggled to put together state-level departments of early learning over the last 10 years. We have a very mature system that's meant to support training and careers. To what extent should we be working a lot harder as a critical part of the solution for opportunity youth? And I mean post-secondary broadly, especially community colleges, certificates, short-term degrees, apprenticeship, other things that community colleges, for example, do really well.
Great, perfect. So that's question number 1. I know there's a mic, yes?
Hi, Nicole Yohalam from the Roadmap Project in South Seattle and South King County, and my question really builds right on Ken's, actually, and it was also about the K-12 system and how to, as we build a movement around opportunity youth, how do we not just, as my colleagues from Philadelphia, Shakima would say, how do we hold the tension between building a better bucket for the young people who have been failed by other systems and fixing the faucet? And there's a tension between those things, and if we are successful in re-engaging 1 million opportunity youth through the Opportunity Youth Network and all this work, but there's just 1 million more waiting, then I don't think we've solved the problem. So how do we make sure this movement is connected to efforts like the post-secondary improvement work and the K-12 school improvement work?
Great. And then 3rd question here.
Okay, I will probably test the panel's ability to track multiple things, because I want to go back to something that Dorothy set up and actually ask a question to Russell. Because Dorothy, I agree with you about the power of getting investments at the state level. Oh, pardon me, I didn't follow the rules. Nick Mathern, Gateway to College National Network. But one of the things I'm wondering about, Russell, is have you, in your work, doing the county by county analysis, done aggregate work to look at how states are stacking up so that we could hold up, for example, states like Washington or Colorado or Massachusetts, where they've made some policy efforts to recognize re-engagement work and to look at are there dramatically different outcomes in those states, and can we track those outcomes to that and then use that as some leverage to go after other states, or go after those 3 states to be even better leaders by making investments in addition to their policy accommodations?
So, Russell, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to the first 2 questions.
Sure. So yes, the numbers are there. Have we done a deep dive analysis of this state did X and it led to Y. No, and we love your help with that. We love anybody that wants to look at the data and look at your own experience in your state and help us work through that. That would be great. We're a really small team and we would love that support. But yes, the numbers are there at the county level and then aggregated up to state, so you can see, this goes without saying probably, but with any data collection, there's a lag, right? And so it's not like I put 50 students in a training program this week and then dropping from the heavens, this real-time data showing me that now the number of opportunity youth in my county dropped. So it would be great if that's the way things worked. But regardless, yes, you can see the numbers by state level. And the disparities are significant for sure. And so you can definitely see places that have made investments and that just have broader and healthier economies, right, in general, where more people are plugged in. You can see where the numbers go up and down. And the county level is hugely stark. There are places where there's essentially nobody who's disconnected, right, in some counties where everybody's plugged in. And there are counties where a third of the young adults are not in school or working. And so, so yes, it's there. We can do that. We would love your support in doing more analysis like that. Yeah.
Great. And so then back to the full panel, we had questions really focused on the post-secondary system. But the first, how do we work harder to use the post-secondary system, broadly speaking, as a way to try and move forward? And then secondly, this tension between, where do we start? And how do we bring both the prevention side with the, okay, we've got a challenge, how do we address the challenge and flip the challenge side of the work that we're trying to do, and also thinking about that in the context of the systems that we have as well.
Can I start with that? So I want to start with the K through 12 question and then hit on the post-secondary question. And most of this is going to come from my own personal experience, but then hitting on the work that I do at CGI. So some of you know I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised, had an interesting life story, was from a middle class, dad became disabled, family was on food stamps and Medicaid, and life completely changed for my family and for myself, right? And so raised by the same parents, I became a Fulbright scholar and my brother was arrested a few times, right? Very different life experiences. The differences that I saw and that I used to my advantage when doing this work, because at the end of the day, I have great access to people like employers and foundations and folks with a lot of money, but I also can help guide them with my suggestions on who they invest in and the programs that they work in, and a lot of that is based on my experience growing up in Brooklyn, right? So, and also what I learned from all of you and your communities. So the difference in the K through 12 side was my teachers were my saviors, right? They were going to get me out of my crazy life. For my brother, the teachers were his enemies, right? So I think on the K through 12 side, it's that teacher engagement piece. That is the key piece for helping kids like me, students like me, like my brother, succeed and find a sense of hope, but also find a sense of a goal, a mission in life, meaning in life, right? I was lucky, I did really well. I became a Posse scholar. I'm not sure how many of you in the audience know about Posse, but I went to a really great, cool liberal arts college. They gave me a $200,000 scholarship, and everyone liked me a lot. And my first month on campus, I was told, Danielle, you're not gonna do well because you're from New York City and you went to public school. Danielle, everyone from Brooklyn is poor, is uneducated, and is a minority. Danielle, why do you have to be Italian American and why does your boyfriend have to be black? Why can't you all just be American, right? And this was coming from my fellow students. This was not coming from the administration. This was not coming from my professors. This was coming from my fellow students. Called up my mother in October and I said, if you don't get me the heck out of here or buy me a car, you're paying for me to go to NYU, right? But that key piece that kept me on campus was that Posse, was that mentor, were those 12 students who understood my experience and said, Danielle, take a breath. Like, you're not going to get on the Greyhound and go back to Brooklyn. You are going to survive and you are going to thrive here. And I did. But I did that because of the support services that were on the campus. Now, I was a student that had great grades and had lots of extracurricular activities, right? And so technically I had beat the odds. But going from a public school in New York City to Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania was, to this day I say, you could send me to the moon because if I could survive Carlisle, I could survive anything, really. And so, but every day when I am doing the work I'm doing, I'm thinking back to that experience that I had, the experience my brother had, my cousins had, my friends have. How many folks, if you turn on my Sweet 16 video, how many kids are dead or in jail? That's what I think of every single day. And so I think we could say, okay, yeah, employers or this or that, but I think it's really to guide us with the authenticity of the experience and to really make sure that we're interweaving that into everything I do. And now, do I go into every meeting with employers and do this spiel? No. But I know how to get my message across, right?
Thank you. Other members of the panel speaking to that? Elyse?
I'll give a very different kind of response, which will be not nearly as compelling as Danielle's. But I think there is, tremendous role for both the K-12 system and the education system to play. Obviously, they're the dominant systems we have in the country. What I would say is I think the work around Opportunity Youth has grown up because of a void in those two systems. And so there's been a lot of work to try to say, what about these young adults that have, frankly, that these systems have failed? And so now that this system is starting to mature a little, this field is starting to mature a little bit, I think there is a question about how we circle back to the dominant systems and figure out what's theirs to do. And, of course, I mean, I think always about the employer perspective, what they really care about at the end of the day is, do we have good talent? So they are actually not really that interested in, is this an employment pathway that happens in the K-12 system, a la 12 for Life's program that Southwire and Carroll County Schools, it's essentially a prevention system, or in a nonprofit, whether it's Youth Build or Year Up or what have you, or in a community college system. So I think the question really is, how do we create the combination of appropriate training, supports, and networks that help this group of young adults thrive in those systems? So yes, and that's part of the work, I think, to figure out how to reconnect young people through the systems we have.
And how do we get the school reform movements to focus on this point that the teachers can be your saviors or they can be your enemies? Yep. And the 130,000 young people who've come through Youth Build had left high school. When you ask them, why did you leave high school, most of them will say, nobody really cared that I was there. Nobody cared about me, and they said I was going to fail. They had the experience your brother had. And the teachers need to understand their power in this, and we need to train them a little differently. I'm a teacher by training, and I taught public school in Harlem before I did this, and we could make a difference in the schools.
I'll add a really brief, just forward-looking comment about something that's coming up, because I think you're asking the right questions. I think even though we're all focusing like a laser on this population and there's a lot more education work to do, which we've all been saying, we also don't want to build another silo, right? We don't want to ignore the fact that this stuff starts upstream and there's lots of interventions that can be effective in earlier grades and career engagement in high school for a freshman that might keep them on track because they're not as interested in the academic pursuits. All of that stuff's important, and which I know we're all on the same page on that. Opportunity Nation's next big national summit is February 26th in Washington, D.C., and I just wanted to mention it briefly because it will focus on this issue: how do we reduce this historically high rate of youth unemployment and really build these stronger pathways? It'll culminate in a call to action that everyone can see themselves reflected in, both for individuals and sectors to take part in. We're co-convening it with the U.S. Chamber and the Business Roundtable to make sure that employer perspective is fundamentally involved with Jobs for America's graduates and also the United Way. And we hope many of you will be there and participate in that event. We'll have elected officials from both parties, including some folks in Congress that we need to come back after the midterms and build on the success of reauthorizing WIA and do a whole bunch of other things. We'll have leaders from the business world on the demand side, and many, many young adults, of course, telling their stories and leading at the event as well. So I just wanted to flag that as a forward-looking thing on the horizon. I hope you'll flag that date and join us if you can, as to hopefully continue that conversation and make sure we're not building a silo, but getting kind of all hands on the problem. It's February 26th. It's in Washington, D.C., and if you go to Opportunity Nation's website, the registration is not yet open, but you can find the landing page and sign up to receive updates about it.
Can I say to the gentleman from Gates, the investment that Gates has made in pathways to post-secondary have been very valuable. Thank you.
And Ken back there, I see you. I'm getting the hook, so we will need to end this panel.